You're in the water loop.
Waterloop is made possible in part by grants from Spring Point Partners and the Walton Family Foundation.
Waterloop.
Hey, this is Travis with Waterloop. I want to tell you a story about High Sierra Showerheads, who I'm proud to have as a sponsor of this podcast, particularly because they make incredibly water-efficient showerheads. I've talked with owner David Malcolm about growing up in California, learning about the importance of water and energy efficiency from his father. David has been designing high-efficiency nozzles for agriculture and golf courses for the past 30 years. The golf course people actually came to him wanting a nozzle that produced a uniform spray but was water efficient. So David went in and designed a nozzle that explodes a low pressure stream of water into a shower of large, powerful droplets. David actually thought this would make a great showerhead, and that's how High Sierra Showerheads was born. And nobody has their nozzle technology. It's patented, and you get a great shower while saving water. Use promo code LOOP20 for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com.
You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop. This is Travis. Excited for this episode to be talking about a body of water here where I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, Greenfield Lake. But this body of water, what the water quality problems that it has, the challenges, and I think the solutions are shared by many water bodies across the country. I have three guests here with me for this episode. I have Mike Mallin. He is research professor at the Center for Marine Sciences at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Mike, I'm glad you could join the podcast.
Happy to be here.
I have Dana Sargent, Executive Director of Cape Fear River Watch. Dana, glad to have you as well.
Thanks for having me.
And I have Fred Royal, Stormwater Services Manager with the City of Wilmington. Fred, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Glad to be here on a beautiful Friday.
So obviously a lot of people listening to this aren't familiar with Greenfield Lake. But Mike, could you describe Greenfield Lake?
Sure. Greenfield Lake, it's not a natural lake. It's an impoundment. And it was first filled in 1750. And then it was made a public park in 1925. The first professional paper written about Greenfield Lake was in 1908, when a researcher was looking for some of the rare and endangered organisms and found some of these in Greenfield Lake, some of these snails. But what's interesting is at that time, in 1908, the lake was described as spring-fed and as unpolluted waters and lying 1.5 miles south of the city of Wilmington. Well, since that time, the city of Wilmington has gone and wrapped itself all around Greenfield Lake. So it's the shorelines and the watersheds of Greenfield Lake are one of the most highly developed in the city of Wilmington. So what's happened here is something that has happened probably to numerous lakes throughout North America, is that the development has led to increased nutrient pollution, increased fecal bacteria pollution, and finally, a few years ago, this lake was placed on the state's 303D list for impaired waters. So what comes down to it is that we, as the community, have to decide what to do to rectify this problem. And we got a good start on it a few years ago. One of my former graduate students, Nick Areola, did a study of the 5 incoming streams to the lake, trying to determine which ones carried the most nitrogen and phosphorus into the lake. And as such, we narrowed it down to two major ones. What's going on next is we have to, we're in the process of developing a plan to reduce the nutrients. What we have, the situation in the lake right now, is that every summer we have these massive blue-green algal blooms. And occasionally those are accompanied by fish kills, and certainly unsightly, and so on. And as I mentioned, we also have a problem with elevated fecal bacteria counts in the lake. And this is this result is very common from all the built-up area, as we like to call it, impervious surface area in the watershed. So what happens there is that whenever it rains, all of the pollutants, fertilizers, animal waste, and what have you, end up washing down into the lake. And the lake is not a well-flushed lake. There is an outlet that goes to the Cape Fear River, but the nutrients go in there and sit, got plenty of sunlight, and thus we have these massive algal blooms.
So we could say Greenfield Lake is too green, right? with those algal blooms and the nutrients. Yeah, I mean it's a cool place. I mean it's one of my favorite places to go in the area here. It's got like almost a 5-mile path around it. You've got all the trees and the Spanish moss, and there's some alligators you can see, and people even take the little pedal boats out on the water. And so it's an awesome, even though it's got the city all around it, that's one of the things that's great. It's an awesome amenity for the city. And that's, I think, a big part of the driver to try to clean it up, right? I'd love to hear a little bit more about maybe the water quality problems or what's causing this, maybe from the perspective of Fred as, a stormwater manager.
Certainly. So Stormwater Services for the city, we have two primary focal points. One is to reduce pollutants that flow into water bodies throughout the city. And this primarily means non-point source flow of stormwater runoff, which means everywhere except sewer pipes, essentially. And it's a huge challenge with a higher development, higher density, and higher land use issues. So ways we can get to try to mitigate that and go in the other direction are creating a green infrastructure, protecting more green infrastructure, creating more green infrastructure, because that removes nitrogen and phosphorus that I spoke about very well. It also reduces volume that runs off of paved surfaces, etc. So Greenfield Lake is a challenge, but it's something we're looking at very strongly. We have many watersheds in Wilmington, and we're looking at each one individually for its specific need and the land uses in that watershed and how we can make changes systematically. The other issue we deal with a lot is flooding. And, that's a huge issue. Here we are in eastern North Carolina. We have tropical storms and we have a lot of rainfall. So we have to balance as much as possible flooding issues with water quality issues. Flooding issues typically mean we are modeling and replacing antiquated drainage infrastructure, pipes, channels, what have you. They have to be larger and more efficient. And that by default sort of does not help water quality. So we have to also take water quality into our minds when we're looking at design alternatives. And we've got some very exciting capital projects designed now that I'm looking forward to working with through construction to do that very thing.
The idea to try to address these problems in Greenfield Lake, you just talked about getting everyone involved in projects, and that's what's happened here with Greenfield Lake and Wilmington. Is there's a real collaborative effort with a lot of different parties to try to improve the water quality, to address that nutrient pollution. How did it end up that there are so many different parties involved in this effort? How did that collaboration come about?
Like you mentioned, Greenfield Lake is a gem in our community, and we are so lucky to have this. It's an urban lake. The ecology there is amazing, and it provides an opportunity for folks that might otherwise not be able to get into the environment to walk over to the park and wander around, and also, hop on a pedal board. Those are actually managed through a partnership that Cape Fear River Watch holds with the City of Wilmington. So we manage that boathouse and encourage, anyone listening to head over there and get on one of those boats and check out the alligators and the amazing birds that are flying all over Greenfield Lake. The key aspect of our mission is to help people get out into the environment, because we know that when people get out into the environment, they want to help to make sure that it is protected. And I think the partners here are all groups and representatives of groups that understand the importance of that. The City of Wilmington obviously is a huge supporter and understanding that our region is just a gem of biodiversity, and our water is our life here in the Cape Fear region. So they're huge supporters. UNCW, Mike Mallin and his team have been doing water quality sampling for years. I don't think there's anybody who knows more about the nutrient issues of our water bodies than Mike Mallin. So I'm just extremely grateful for these guys to be on this team. Cape Fear River Watch actually kind of compiled the team, but it was under the direction of Mike Mallin and his partner, Larry Cahoon, to really get this party started. So they did that, and then I pulled in, a couple other folks. We have an amazing engineering team called Moffett Nickel that are also part of this effort, and all of these groups are represented by people that we know. We are so grateful to have such a tight community of people that really respect the environment here. I'm just excited that we all got together to work on this project.
Yeah, well, let's dive into the actual projects themselves and what the solutions are, what's being done to address that nutrient pollution and other runoff. So, yeah, what's the approach? What has happened? What is happening? What's gonna happen?
As Dana put it so nicely, my laboratory has been sampling Greenfield Lake for many, many years, so we have a very intimate knowledge of it. And as part of the project that's ongoing right now, my particular team is sampling the surface waters that are coming in, and hopefully when the engineering solutions are done, those surface waters will be much cleaner. Our colleague, Dr. Cahoon, Larry Cahoon, his group is sampling the sediments of the lake and of the incoming streams and of the surrounding wetlands and wet detention ponds. And what we're looking for there is the nutrients that are stored in the sediments, and we're looking for these microbial processes. The key one here is denitrification. What that means is the polluting nutrients that run into the water, generally in the form of nitrate or ammonia, when they're in excess, you want to get them out, okay? And this process of denitrification, it's done by bacteria, and it's done around the roots and rhizomes of wetland plants. The nitrate comes in there, the bacteria turn it into nitrogen gas, which is harmless. It's part of our atmosphere. Boom, goes up, goes out of the system. So we're trying to encourage, the goal would be to try to first figure out how much denitrification is going on in these branches coming into the lake, and then figure out how we can encourage this either by retaining the water longer in nearby wetlands or selectively planting proper aquatic vegetation. So we're doing this, and these are based on research that's been done elsewhere, the U.S. and Canada and other locations.
Interesting. Other folks want to talk about the work that's underway and what the projects are going to be, these solutions, Fred?
Yeah, so the one project that is going on now, existing wet pond owned by the city into essentially a wetland. We will incorporate more shallow shelf areas for vegetation to be planted, just to do that job of denitrification and to settle out solids. And that's in one of the two tributaries that Mike mentioned earlier that goes into Greenfield Lake. The city has a number of wet ponds that have been built over many years that are public, that are the responsibility of the city. And one of my goals is to look at these wet ponds and look at converting some of them into constructed wetlands for this exact same purpose. The wet ponds tend to fill with sediment, and they tend to become almost anoxic, low oxygen in the summer, and they actually become dangerous and a public health hazard, which we've had a couple summers ago. So that's one of my goals over the next several years, just from the city's stormwater pond management side.
Yeah, an important PSA here to a lot of these algae blooms can actually be toxic, right? And have microcystin and cylindrospleropsin. I always struggle with that second one in there. And I know that people's pets, especially dogs, can be really vulnerable to that. So, keep your pets, keep your dogs out of these type of ponds in the communities, and unless you really know otherwise. I think maybe Dana, you wanted to add something about the projects underway.
Yeah, because we didn't mention another partner that's not represented here on this call, which is NC State, and part of our project that we're working on with them, with this project, includes their work to take a look at a type of medium that has the potential to remove the dangerous nutrients that Dr. Mallin was talking about. So they're doing a test of that in a nearby pond, and all indications from the previous research that has been done on this type of medium indicates that it will do the job. So we're really excited to see the results of their sampling, and then once that's complete, we'll hope to install this medium into the areas that are penetrating the Greenfield Lake.
This being such a collaborative effort, what's the benefit of having so many different entities involved in a restoration project like this? Universities, a city, environmental group, an engineering firm. What's the value of, when you're going to restore a water body, having such a diverse group of people involved?
And something I could add right here is that as far as these disparate groups that have come together here, we all have had previous ties together. Like UNCW, of course, has been working with the city and with Riverwatch for a long time. We have a collaborator, as Dana said, with NC State, and our private engineering partner, Moffitt and Nickel. Their local representatives are either graduates of UNCW or NC State. So we do have longstanding ties together, and that makes it work much more smoothly. We kind of know where each other is at on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we also benefit. I mean, not only from the expertise of these folks, these gentlemen here, who are just when they start talking about the stormwater management, my eyes sort of glaze over. It's not my skill. And these guys know this stuff like the back of their hands. But then we have Riverwatch, who has the capacity to provide outreach and education and an understanding to the general population of what this work is. And so, we're really kind of hoping that after, this project, we're going to continue to do obviously many more projects on water quality in this lake, and we are ongoing doing other projects in other urban streams, and we have the capacity to kind of just say, hey, look at this, look at what we can do if we just get together and put our minds together and put our resources together. Look at what can come of it.
I'll just add that Stormwater Services basically counts on these relationships to continue. The water quality sampling data and the expertise from UNCW and all of the outreach and education from Cape Fear Riverwatch and others, we could not do this as a city government alone, even if we staffed up. It's too broad and a complicated and complex matter that you have to get in all aspects of human life and human activities to get the message out and to do the proper work and research. My hope is we can continue to do this and broaden our reach to other groups, citizens, even homeowners associations, etc. Because without this full collaborative effort, it would be really difficult for a city government to handle on its own by a long shot.
Sure. Yeah. It's obviously every partner here brings their own skill set or specialty to this that makes it all happen. So we've talked about how, nutrient pollution of a lake or another kind of water body is a very common problem across the country, around the world, really. If a community has a lake and a water body that has this problem, and they want to pursue some type of solution, some type of collaboration, how could they get started with that?
I think that the first thing you got to begin with is understanding the problem. And if you have a lake, a community, which you have, say, eutrophic waters, very, very green from the algae, people will look at it and say, well, that looks ugly and so on. But they might not understand that could also harbor the toxins that you guys were talking about a few minutes ago, the algal toxins that could also harbor the fecal bacteria from the pet waste and what have you. And so you have to have, first of all, some scientific expertise to sample the waters, tell you what you're facing, first of all. And then some research to tell you where is the pollution coming from? Is it just washing in on the shores of the lake? Is it coming from specific streams? Sometimes some of this stuff is airborne, depending on where you're living. So you need to get that nailed down. Once you get that nailed down, then you can start with an outreach campaign, which is what Riverwatch is very good at. And then you then get a collaborative plan together, work with the local government as well as whoever it is that's owns the lake, if it's a homeowners association or if it's part of a city or part of a town, and work with them. Then determine what your next approach is going to be, how to rectify this problem, how to reduce all these materials running into the lake, and hopefully make it cleaner in the future.
Well, it makes sense that the research professor identifies needing science as your first step, right? Understand the problem from a scientific perspective, and then take it from there.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dr. Mallin that research is definitely key. You got to figure out what the problem is. But from the public outreach sort of standpoint, I always say that education of the public needs to come absolutely first. You can't have anybody being active in becoming activists in terms of protecting the environment unless they understand what's happening and they understand what's at stake. And so I think we've got both things here. Unfortunately, working in our favor, we have a problem with the lake, but we also have this beautiful ecological gem that our community has come to love and has come to understand that they want to protect. So,
yeah.
So I appreciate you giving us this opportunity and for you highlighting these types of things, because education is key to get people active.
Absolutely. Fred?
Land use planning on a watershed scale, even a small watershed scale, is critical to this conversation. Greenfield Lake is watersheds are what are built out, if you will. There's not a whole lot of raw land that can be looked at for assisting with the watershed quality. So it becomes a retrofit type of a scenario to put everything in reverse to the extent possible. So I guess my point is, from a city government standpoint, land use planning is critical. Even individual development site design is extremely critical to not add to the issue that's already occurring.
I thank the three of you so much for your time and for the information. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Greenfield Lake. I spend a lot of time riding my bike around there and walking around there and taking my kids there. So I'm looking forward to following the work and following the progress in water quality in that lake. And like I said, I wanted to have this conversation because it's a common problem in towns and cities across the country. So thank all three of you very much.
It's fun to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Waterloop, 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 Waterloop.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode. A special thanks to Waterloop supporters Spring Point Partners and the Walton Family Foundation. The Waterloop podcast is sponsored by High Sierra Showerheads, the smart, stylish way to save energy, water, and money while enjoying a powerful shower. Save 20% with promo code WATERLOOP at highsierrashowerheads.com.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.